Here's what I would like to start with. Fundamental business equation. It's profit equals to sales minus expenses. Very simple, yet I would say deceptively simple, because we're seeing a lot of companies are going bankrupt. So this formula hides a lot of things behind these three items. And today we're going to address the sales portion of this formula. And being a sales and marketing kind of person, I really don't like to squeeze the expenses very much. I'm going to be very careful about the expenses, obviously, but I'm going to invest whenever there's a proper and appropriate requirement for investment. For example, if we want to open up a new store to increase market share, that's an investment, that's an expense, but we're going to get a huge return. That's why we're doing this, right? We're going to get a huge return out of that investment. So I would like to capitalize today on how to increase the sales. And before we get to that, we have to be able to, first of all, measure what's going on around us in our business. So we're going to talk about some measurements before we get into the real blueprint and the formula. Why do we measure? We measure for two reasons. Number one, what gets measured gets done. And number two, if you can't measure, you can't manage. Number two is probably more important, because if you can't measure, you really don't know where you stand, whether it's improving, not improving. You have no idea, because either you're not measuring it or you can't measure it for some reason. Now, what do we need to measure? We're going to address, during the formula conversation, we're going to address specific KPIs, but generally speaking, when we look at the retail business, we're looking at pillars of retail. So let's look at what those pillars are and how we can measure those pillars before we move to the formula. It started with 4 pillars, sometimes called 4 P's of marketing. So we need a place to sell our product or service. We need a product or service to sell. We need to price the product or service properly so we can make some money. And finally, we have to tell people where we are and what we're selling. That's the promotion part of the business. All the marketing, advertising, everything is in that box. So this 4 P's of marketing, or 4 pillars of retail concept, worked pretty good for the longest time, I'd say until about 1940s, 1950s, when the chain operations started to proliferate and became prominent. With the advancement in transportation and communications, companies started opening up stores all over the place. And it's very common, if you look at a company with, let's say, 200, 300, 400 stores, it's very easy to find 2 locations with the same characteristics. For example, the size of the store, in both cases the same, size usually determines how many staff members you're going to have. And so we have the same size store, we have the same number of staff, we have the same kind of customer, looking at the trade area characteristics, the same demographics, same psychographics, same lifestyle, pretty much the same kind of customer we're looking at in both locations. And product, of course, is exactly the same. Price is exactly the same. Promotion is exactly the same. Yet, you may find quite a bit of a difference in terms of the output and the productivity you're getting out of these 2 locations. I mean, in my career, I've seen 10% difference, I've seen 25% difference, I've seen 50% difference, I've seen 100% difference. One location doubling up the other one, although technically they're supposed to be generating same sales volume. And you go, what's the reason? The reason is the people. So now we're talking about 5 pillars of retail, because people make a huge difference in terms of production, in terms of sales and profit. You may have seen this in your own experience. You move one store manager from one location to another, suddenly store goes up 20-25%. And all you've done is moving one store manager from one location to another. And the same applies to sales associate. I mean, obviously, when you see 100% difference, you have rock stars in one location and total losers on the other one. So that gives you that kind of a difference. It's phenomenal how much people can make a difference. And then we were working with 5 pillars, but by the end of last century, at the end of 20th century, another pillar showed up. We call that technology. Technology is very important. Especially the selection of the right technology is very important. You have to choose the right product for your needs. Otherwise, it can be pretty disastrous. We have seen examples of wrong technology being put in place and then people becoming a slave to that technology and not being able to run the business properly. So selection of technology is very important, but once you selected the technology right, it can support and enhance your operation dramatically. So now we're talking about 6 pillars of retail, and if we want to be successful in this business, we have to maximize our productivity in each and every one of these pillars. To be able to do that, we have to be able to measure the performance of each of these pillars. So let's quickly look at how we're going to measure these pillars. Place, location. When we talk about place and location, first thing we measure is sales per square foot. Sales per square foot, very good for comparison purposes. Shopping malls love this KPI. They measure it all the time, and they in fact set their rents, respective relative rents, on the basis of the sales per square foot the shopping mall generates. So it's an important KPI for location purposes. Another measurement you want to take is traffic per hour. How much traffic is coming in to your store? Even now we have such technology, we can measure the people passing by in front of the store, either in a self-standing street location or even in the malls, because not every location in the mall is equal, obviously. So we have higher traffic areas, less traffic areas. So counting the traffic has a lot of advantages. One of the important advantage in terms of sales considerations and the performance considerations is potential. When you look at your sales report, you don't see the potential. Sales report is a transaction report. It gives you what happened. It doesn't give you what could have happened. That's what you get out of the traffic measurements. That is why it is extremely important. If you don't have traffic counters in your stores, that should be right on the top of your list of acquisitions. Because here's an example for you to make it clearer. Let's say you're looking at a sales report from yesterday. Store A sold $10,000 and store B sold $5,000. Now, at the first glance, obviously store A is 2 times more productive than store B. But if you look at the traffic report, it shows store A received 1,000 people into the store that day, and store B received only 200 people into the store that way. Now, it's a totally different story suddenly. Store A generated $10 per person. Store B generated $25 per person. Suddenly, the whole picture is changed. We were thinking by just looking at the sales report, store A was so much more successful. In fact, it was totally the other way around. So that's why traffic counters are so critical, because otherwise you don't know what the potential it was. And finally, gross margin return on footage is a very good return on investment calculation for the rent you're paying. So those are the three things we use to qualify and quantify the location, the place. Moving to product, first thing we look at when we're measuring the product performance is inventory turns. How many times we're turning the inventory at SKU level, category level, department level, store level, district level, region level, company level. Inventory turns is a very important financial indicator in terms of health of the organization. Second thing we look at is weeks of stock. Sometimes it's called days of stock. And basically it shows you in an approximate way how much inventory you're carrying, how long the inventory is going to last, kind of thing, based on your average sales. It's a good indication of, and quick and good indication of whether you have too much inventory on an item category, again, or too little inventory based on the average sales. So that's a good measurement for health of inventory. And another return on business, return on investment calculation is gross margin return on inventory investment. Sometimes just written by one eye, but we have to make sure that this is for inventory investment. And GMROI is one of the most important measurements in retail business. It's a very versatile thing as well. The formula is gross margin times your inventory turns, which means it's showing you how much money you're making every time you turn the inventory at any level, whichever level you're measuring the turns. So it's a profitability, very, very high quality profitability measurement. And also it's versatile because you can measure it against, like the SKUs against each other, item to item. You can compare the categories, how they're doing in terms of GMROI. You can compare people, whether they're the sales associates or the buyers. Buyers, one of the KPIs in buyers scorecard is GMROI. You can compare suppliers. Which supplier is your most profitable supplier? GMROI will tell you that. And finally, another measurement we want to look at is sell-through. Sell-through is velocity, if you will, or speed by which the merchandise moves. It shows the desirability of the product by the marketplace, by the customer. And it's very important, especially in fashion business. And today, everything is changing so fast. A lot of categories are moving into fashion category, like electronics, for example, computers, because they're changing so fast, very much like fashion. In 3 months, your computer is already either discontinued or out of fashion in a way, because there's new processors, new memory, new kind of, accessories are being introduced on a daily basis almost. So what do you use sell-through to follow the desirability of the merchandise so that you don't get stuck with merchandise that is not going to sell, that is out of fashion. And so sell-through is a good indicator and a good key performance indicator as far as the product is concerned. When it comes to price, we look at two things. They're actually pointing to the same differential, the difference between selling and cost. Question is, why do we have two things describing exactly the same thing? That's just the way it developed. Retail business, organized retail, if you will, is almost 200 years old now. So over time, we developed two measurements for that differential between selling and cost: gross margin and markup. Usually suppliers like to use markup, makes their life easier, I guess, communicating with the buyers. But gross margin, in my opinion, is a much more intelligent measurement because it tells me immediately how much money you're taking to the bank for every $100 you sell. When we're talking about percent gross margin, and if I ask you, what's your gross margin, you say 45%, I know for every $100 you sell, you're taking $45 to the bank. So that kind of intelligence is important to me because I can then compare your store to another store and your district to another district, etc., to find out where we stand in terms of individual unit performances. Okay, next one is promotion. Once again, we're looking for a return on investment. Really, that's what the whole business is about. Sometimes I say that's what life is about, return on investment. When you look at your best friend, why do you like your best friend so much? Because there is a return. You get return out of that relationship. But in business, definitely, everything my advice, you should look at should be through the lens of return on investment. Shall I do this? What's my return on investment? Shall I spend time on this? What is my return on investment? You should be spending most of your time and energy on the issues that are going to give you the highest return on investment, obviously. So when we look at the promotion, we're looking at return on investment. Now, difficulty is measurement. How are we going to, up to this point, everything we talked about, absolutely measurable and accurately measurable, but promotion is not like that because marketing, advertising, everything else that you do in terms of promoting your products and the locations, they are dependent on other things. For example, you came up with a great advertising, great copy, great graphics, great offer, everything is wonderful. You're running it on the most prominent daily newspaper in the marketplace, and then suddenly huge storm. Everybody is excited, they like the ad, they like the offer, they want to go to the store, but they can't. Nobody wants to leave the house. So the question, was the promotion bad? No, promotion was great, but it didn't work out because of the weather. Now, sometimes this happens in larger chains, actually any chain operation, it happens, unfortunately, but marketing department comes up with a great idea, great promotion, flyers are printed, distributed all over the place, and customers are excited, running to the stores, and they forgot to tell the stores. So customer comes in, the store people are saying, look, what? I don't know, I haven't seen this flyer before, and what are you talking about, kind of thing. So again, promotion was very successful, but somebody screwed up big time and forgot to tell the stores, and so the whole thing collapsed. Nevertheless, because we're spending so much money on promotion, advertising, marketing. CEOs want to know where the money is going. They want to feel at least comfortable that there is some return on investment coming back. And so there's a whole bunch of companies that are popping up nowadays to address this, and they're coming up with very sophisticated algorithms. And so we're going to see. It's still in a work in progress kind of situation. So that's what is. I'm mentioning sales lift there. Somewhat primitive way of measuring a return on investment would be measure the sales lift immediately after the promotion started, and then compare it to previous week, compare it to last month's same week, compare it to last year's same week, so that if there is lift showing, and then you can turn that into, after cost of goods sold, obviously, you can see if you're getting a return on investment on your marketing and advertising effort. When it comes to people, we're going to spend, the formula is really based on the people side of the business. We have other formulas for product side of the business, and but we're going to look at today's formula is addressing the people side of the business. So we're going to revisit the KPIs in people part of the business, but quickly, what are the important measurements when it comes to people? And people, we divide it into two groups. One is our staff, the other one is customers, because we want to be able to measure the customers too. And so our side, let's say our staff, we measure the sales, we measure average dollars per transaction, we measure units per transaction, we measure wage cost, and we measure another return on investment calculation, gross margin return on labor. That shows how old this business is. We don't call our people labor anymore. We call them team members. We call them associates. We call them consultants. But anyway, it's not wise to change it at this point because these formulas and calculations are entrenched in the retail business literature. So better saying for that Jim roll, it would be gross margin return on payroll. So basically what it says is how much money I'm spending on this person, what am I getting back in return? And once again, these gross margin return calculations are extremely versatile when it comes to comparing, because the formulas of these will bring everything to apples comparison. So you can safely compare people, compare stores, compare districts, etc., and knowing that you're comparing apples to apples. So they're very useful. We address all the formulas in Retail Math webinar and Retail Math book. So if you're wondering about where to get the formulas for these things, just buy the Retail Math book or attend one of the Retail Math webinars. Okay, now customer side of things gets a little bit more difficult because really the scientific definition of customer happiness, that's what we want to measure, right? What do we want to measure on the customer side? We want to know if the customer is happy or not, really. That's the bottom line. Now, to be able to address that, if customer is happy, we have to first of all look at the definition of customer happiness. What's customer satisfaction? Here is the scientific definition of customer satisfaction. Customers are satisfied when we meet their expectations, okay? They're dissatisfied when we fail to meet their expectations, when we come short. They're delighted when we exceed their expectations. So Based on this definition, we're really working with expectations of our customers. Now, difficulty still remains because how do you know what the expectations are? That is where we get into heavy-duty identification of the customer, there's demographics, psychographics, lifestyle, and really defining the customer so that we get an idea. First of all, we can talk to the people. Once we define who our target customer is, then we know who to talk to, right? And then by talking, at least we can develop some ideas in terms of what their expectations are. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. That's another course, that's another conversation piece. But if you look at the key performance indicators on the screen, really the number of complaints, nobody complains anymore. So you're not going to get a significantly, statistically significant sample size to base on your decisions on. Praise letters, nobody writes praise letters unless they're the relatives of the sales associates or something. And or unless someone did out of this world and unbelievable, so they were almost forced to write some praise letters, but we don't get praise letters. Average wait time at cash can be an important indicator in certain businesses only. Certain retail verticals like supermarkets are very keen about this. Sometimes apparel business can get pretty crazy, especially if they're holding some kind of a promotion or some kind of a incentive for the customer going on. Out of these four, I think most reliable measurement would be number of repeat customers. With the huge competition we have in the marketplace today, customers are not going to come back if they're not happy. They have lots of options. So measurement of repeat customers becomes pretty critical so that you know how you stand in terms of satisfying the customers. And to be able to do that effectively, unless you're even in telco business, telco business, you get all the information from the customer, but they're not going to produce anything when they come back. And sometimes, you can't follow the accessory sales through that kind of a mechanism. If you're selling warranted items, you capture the customer's information. But if you're selling apparel, for example, nobody gives you any information. So there's no way of measuring repeat customer except through loyalty program. That's why loyalty program is extremely important for the retailers. Some people think it is some kind of a creative discounting scheme or giving some bribes to the customers. I think the contrary, because through the card business that customer carries for your loyalty club, you can effectively measure the repeat customers. The key there is loyalty program should be so good that customer produces the card every time they show up at the store. That's critical. That's why the loyalty program has to be relatively lucrative, makes enough punch that customer feels like they should be carrying the card and producing the card every time they purchase something from you. That way you can certainly follow the repeat customer business effectively. Okay, so we're going to carry on to technology. Same conversation holds, the same conversation we had on promotions holds true for technology as well. Very difficult to separate or isolate is a better word, isolate the technology's impact from all the other factors, because somehow, same as promotion, somehow they got mixed in and becomes difficult to say, okay, we have achieved 10% increase because we implemented the software. If you can isolate it to a department, like accounting here, I'm saying number of errors per sales volume, if your accounting was making 100 mistakes and then you bought a new accounting software package and put it in and the mistakes are down to 50, you save 50 mistakes. How much is each mistake? Let's say $100. Okay, you save $5,000 a month. Is that enough to return on investment? Maybe, but all of these are approximate calculations and nothing like the other pillars where we know exactly how many dollars per square foot we're generating. Nevertheless, you have to have some idea because, as we said, you have to maximize your productivity in every single pillar. Okay, with that being the introduction, we're going to move into the formula.